What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Tell Me More podcast presented by Major League Success. I have the one and only Sara Walsh with eXp Realty with us today. Sara, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join me.
Well, thanks, Jon, not only for having me, but for doing what you do, because I think everyone knows and loves you because of all the connectivity you're providing all of us. And, I think after we had the pandemic, we all know that even though we all have a tendency to love to talk and text, there's nothing better than connectivity where you get to see people, hear from people, and feel like you get to know people better, because a text doesn't usually let you do that. And real estate is really, although we sell properties, we really are a people business.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things for me. It's all about sharing the journey of successful people in our business, and specifically right now, like I'm sharing the journeys of successful agents in our market. And the goal is to just show, people either getting into this business or people that started out, that there's so many different paths, right? That people have taken to get to this point. And there's so many different ways that agents have found success, in this industry. And for me, I always got tired. I got tired of the top agent this, the top agent that. And yes, there's a time and place for those things. But I wanted to really share the journey, because I always tell agents, if you get into this business for fast cash, you're in the wrong business.
Correct. Right. It's not HGTV.
Exactly. And, we're in this to build a career, and we're in this to build a business. And that is a journey, highs, lows, lefts, rights, and everything in between. Right. So, Sara, we always start out on this show from the very beginning, because I've always found that usually there's something that happens either early on in life or in someone's career in the beginning that has a pretty big impact into their real estate business at some point. What was life like for you growing up?
So my mom worked in a law firm and had a psychology background, and my dad was an accountant. He was an auditor. So we had one person who was very much a people person and the psychology of people, and we had one person who was a bean counter, so numbers always mattered. So I think I was pretty blessed having a very mixed family. One was a Republican, one was a social Democrat. So when you talk about having a balanced family, one came from immigrants, one came from a very wealthy background that were property owners and business owners. So when I say I had a diverse background, I really did have a diverse background, which I think is truly a blessing, because I think I look at people for who they are and not maybe what they are, or where they came from, or what stereotype somebody put a box around them. So I think I was pretty blessed in that realm.
Yeah, no, that's wild. Typically you don't see that diversification.
Not anymore.
And I got to ask, because obviously, when we're recording this, it's March. I'm sure your taxes are on point, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, we were laughing about that the other day, trying to make sure we didn't miss any deductions, because you always go through that one last time when you see that number and go, God, I wish it was just a little bit, right?
I just did that because we're in the process of buying 2 houses right now, and doing the taxes and figuring out what's that number that we need to be at to be able to get both, but not really have to pay a ton. It's a fine line that we walk.
Right.
Did you have any interests or hobbies growing up?
So it's kind of funny. I had cheered in high school, and I cheered in college, and did the fun sorority thing. And I was actually a pre-med student. That's what my undergrad was in. And but I started working in a real estate firm when I was in high school. And my father, being that he had a double major in economics and insurance, and a minor in, I think, statistics and something else, kept pushing me to do more business classes, which I didn't do as an undergrad. So I ultimately, later on in life, I think, kind of just to satisfy my own mind and probably satisfy my push from my father, ended up getting my MBA. So if I could have truly a hobby, it would probably be going to class and studying and learning something new. So with that, it kind of follows through with my personality. So every morning, and I try every night, but I'm not so good at night. I read a few pages in some book that I'm taking on. And then I have an app called Blinkist. So I listen to at least a book a morning. And sometimes, because we multitask, we all are probably multitaskers. And if they probably tested most of us, we test ADHD. But I literally sometimes will listen to the same book a couple mornings to make sure that I didn't miss some good aspect of it. And if the book's really great, then I'll go buy it and I'll actually read the book, cover to cover. So I think that learning habit of mine is probably truly there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I do like to travel. So we traveled when I lived at home, and now I travel as an adult and take my daughter places.
I have to unpack because you just went through a lot of school and all of those things, and we'll get to the real estate portion because I'm curious of what led you obviously to that path, and we'll get there. But going to college, you said pre-med, right? With
Yes.
you had a double major and a minor.
No, my dad did, and so he
Oh,
wanted me to
okay.
take more business. He wanted me to take more business classes, and I was really focused on the sciences. So I was always in labs, and I still read science magazines all the time as a hobby, if you want to call it that. So when people get sick and they end up in the hospital, they call me, and I now end up showing up, and I seem more like a hospital administrator because I have enough knowledge to be dangerous, but I do tend to usually get people better service because I ask enough questions that I intimidate, I think, the staff.
What interested you in the sciences and to go pre-med?
Well, I think I grew up with that as a goal because it fascinated me. And I think, knowing that I was probably one of the few kids on our campus that took cytogenetics and a few in a long span of period. There were three of us that took it the year I had taken it. And I think the previous 2 years, no one had signed up for it. So I really am like a science geek. And I really thought I was going to go into that aspect of the world with helping people with genetics and fertile, people that are infertile and go into OBGYN work is what I really ultimately wanted to do, which is kind of funny because I only have one child. But knowing the history of everything, I think I was like one and done would be good enough for me. But I think that's really a draw that I had from the time I was a kid. I think I got a microscope when I was 5, and I had a stethoscope when I was 6. So I was always the one that was checking on everyone and making sure everybody was, well and good. And I think the uniqueness about science is the more you learn, the more you discover, and there's something going on every day that can help you or help a friend or help your life or getting healthy or staying away from something or learning about something. And so, it's a hobby, it's a habit. It's a healthy thing, I think. So, like when coronavirus came, I had been reading about it. So I told all my friends about this virus and what was going on and what we needed to look for. And then when it came, some of my friends were like, "Oh my God, you said this was what was going to happen." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I've been telling you, I've been reading about this." So sometimes it helps in real life too, not just, fulfilling my itch for science stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Did you end up graduating then?
I did my bachelor's. I was pre-med life science, and then later in life, as an adult, I went back and got my MBA.
Okay. What so what was the first career, getting out of school?
So my first career was actually real estate. So I ended up taking classes while I was in college to get my license. I had met a very young realtor, and I got engaged to him my senior year in college. And then I graduated and promptly told my parents I wasn't going to med school, I was going into real estate. And they were kind of taken back. And my father said, "So I just bought you this expensive degree from a private institution, and you're not going to use any of it now, and didn't take the business classes I paid you to take?" But it all works out in the end. So my first real job was as a realtor.
That's wild. And you've been doing it ever
Yes,
since.
ever since.
Now,
30 some years later.
I know you mentioned that, briefly in high school that you had an internship or you worked for a real estate
I did.
company.
I
Was
did.
that and I know there's some history in the family you mentioned of like rentals and
Law
owning
firms
some
and things. Yep,
property.
yep.
What is that? What was that the itch? I mean, did you have interest in it before you
No,
even went to real
no,
estate?
no. Actually, a friend's mother was a realtor, and his sister had worked at this real estate firm as a receptionist and said, "Hey, my sister's graduating from college. My mom thinks this would be a great weekend job for you." And so I failed to call the woman, and they hired somebody, and I guess they fired the girl like a few weeks later. And the woman called me, the manager of the office called me and said, "I got your number from so and so, and we'd like to interview you for a job." And my parents really didn't want me to have a job, to be really honest. I'm an only child, and my dad was probably, pretty protective, and so he really did not want me to work. And I convinced my parents to drive me to this interview. So I'm 15 years old. I go for this interview. They think I probably won't get the job. I get the job. And so then, because, I was probably a quick study, I started learning more and more. And then I kept that job all during high school and college. And then every break I had, if I wasn't going somewhere, I I always had a job there. So every break when I wasn't on vacation, they had stuff for me to do. My boss taught me her job. So then, I filled in as the administrative manager at one of the offices when I was in college, and got all the books up to date, did all the end of the year numbers, and they're like, "How did you know how to do this?" I'm like, "Well, I learned this through the years." So it was kind of, I had the background of the real estate office going on. So I kind of fell into it. So then when I decided to become a realtor, I knew the backside of the real estate office, and then it was just kind of learning the sales part of it.
What was that conversation like? For me, I was kind of the same thing. Went to school for 4 years, graduated, and I 3 weeks later started working with Ryan, as his admin, and then got licensed that same summer.
Right.
Um, what was that conversation like for you, with your parents of going this track of pre med, going into med, and then all of a sudden, hey, sorry, I'm going to go do this thing called real estate over here, and it's going to be 100% commission.
Right. Well, it was kind of funny because I did an undergrad internship at Grant Hospital. So, I was really on that track to go into medicine, even though I had this like weekend gig as a receptionist and everything. But what ultimately happened was I got engaged to a successful realtor. And he was doing really well as a young rookie. He wasn't that much older than me. And so I thought, gosh, this could be great. We could team sell. And if I want to go back to med school, I could. And so when I sat down, I told my parents, hey, not only are we not going to have a big wedding, we're going to do this surprise wedding, invite everybody for my birthday party, and just get married, um, which obviously caught everybody kind of off guard. I'm not going to medical school, and I'm going to go sell real estate. And I think at first my parents thought it was just sort of like a breather, like, oh, she had her license, she knows what to do, she's going to help them for a little while, and then she'll go to medical school. And
Sure.
then I think what happened was, I liked it, and it seemed to like me. And so then, they were like, seriously, you're not going to do this? This is all the training you did? This is, well, seems to work. So I'm still here.
Yeah. I mean, what year was that when you got in?
So I graduated college in 89. I
Okay.
got my license, yeah, right in that window.
Okay. Dive into, what those first couple years were like. I mean, the one good thing, having your journey on here is you've seen a lot of different real estate markets going on, right? And
Yeah,
the highs, the lows, high rates,
right,
low rates, and everything in between.
right.
Getting in 1989, right out of college, what did you focus on in order to be able to grow your business? Because for me, when I got in 2011, I'm not from here, but none of my college friends were buying because we were all broke, and the
Right.
economy wasn't the best for jobs and all those things. How did you focus growing your business as a young person getting into the industry?
So I think there were a couple of things. Being so young and only being 5'1", like I'm not even quite 5'2". I'm almost 5'2", they say sometimes. But being young, and I looked young, so I always had to, try to conduct myself way more mature than I probably even really was mentally. But so I think I focused on understanding the psychology of mirroring, and I probably couldn't
Mm.
articulate it then like I do now, but understanding how to mirror your client. So if you're out with people, in one caliber, to be able to understand their lingo and talk their talk, not fake, not be fake, still be authentic,
Right.
but mirror them. But on the other hand, know when, be authentic to yourself, but know how to swing a little bit more in your behavior, your dress, your techniques and things of that nature. So I think and I think that the psychology of people probably helped me growing up with the mother that I grew who, had studied psychology and things of that nature. Number two is I learned finance because back then it was, I don't want to say more important because it's super important now, but I am a numbers person, unlike a lot of people, because a lot of people are intimidated by math and statistics and things of that nature. I was one of the geeks that took college physics and loved it, right? So I literally would pick the lender's brains so that I had a great understanding of the financing and what it could and could not do for someone, and knowing when to be able to, I hate to say plug and play, but when one product might not be the smart product for this person, to be able to call a different lender and help to place it there. We don't have maybe as much of that now because lending has changed so much, but back then it was really important. But I would tell younger agents and rookies too, it is know your numbers, right? Because why spend time with someone if this isn't going to fit for them, whether it's approval wise or whether, they're gonna get scared and walk in the end. Make sure the numbers work. So I always knew the numbers and the numbers for the client, and now we do things like pre-approvals constantly. We were doing stuff like that now, but they weren't as technical as they are now. And then I think the third thing was hard work, right? So the unfortunate thing now is people see HGTV and they believe HGTV is real. And if any of you have been ever interviewed or on these programs, they're not real. Like I've had clients on them, I've been interviewed on two of them, and I'll be really frank about it. I backed away from being on them, and it was what I was going to have to do and say to be on a program, and I didn't want to do that. Like literally they told me to bring the stuff as a props because the people had already bought the house. I'm like, so I'm going to tell all my clients that see me it's totally fake. Not only was this not really a client of mine, like the houses I was showing them really were immaterial because they already bought the one they were going to buy.
Right.
So the problem is with HGTV, people see it and they think that you're going to show 3 houses and then you're just going to shake the money tree at a closing and all this commission is going to fall on you. And so I think back then I had and I do now, but I mean back then I realized that it's a tenacity to do the right thing and do the job. So it's doing the farming and mailing communities. It's follow-up work. It's calling people when you just don't think you want to make another phone call.
Yeah.
It's returning an email. It's when somebody doesn't have an answer, instead of saying, well, I think it's this, having the backbone to say, you know what, I'll be completely transparent. I don't have this answer, but I will know somebody that does have this answer. So if you give me, 12 hours, 24 hours, 2 hours, whatever it is, let me come back and give you the right answer instead of my guess. And so I think that was the third thing, is just to do the work and to do the research or what needed to be done to make the closings happen ethically and legally.
Yeah. I
Pretty
mean,
easy, pretty straight.
how did you pick up on the mirroring and matching? Was that something like, were you big into like the sales development side of things once you made that decision to switch over into real estate? Like I think of like the Jim Rohns and, all of those guys that were teaching kind of like the business stuff. Now it's like the Ed Milet's and, some other
Right,
people.
right.
But
So,
mirroring and matching, like
way
that's,
back,
I feel like that.
yes. So way back then, there was a guy by the name of Howard Brinton, And Howard Britton did this thing called Star Power, and Howard's now dead. He had sold his company, I think, when he got older and was sick, but I haven't found anything that's been like it. And so Star Power, basically, they would interview top producers all over the country, and he would do gatherings where you could come and break out in groups, and it was real life scenario that you're networking with real life people that are doing it, and it wasn't really more talking at you. It was more of Howard Britton talking with you, with everyone that was at the seminars. And they were like, I think we went to Aspen, Colorado twice, and we're out there, and then we had gone all over the country to do this. And so I think what happened was I was a sponge, right? Because I'm a geek for learning. And so I think it was, wow, I see that this guy acts and looks like this with this crowd of people. Like there was one guy who he was a part-time agent. Now remember, this is 30 years ago, right? 25, 30 years ago. As a part-time agent, he didn't want to give up his real job because he was only selling 19 million a year. Okay. Now do the math, 19 million in 30 years ago numbers versus now, right? And so, that was one thing. And I was looking at his clients and him, and then I was looking at other people and their clients and their market. And then I was looking at the people in Seattle, and I was looking at the people in Boca Raton, and all of them were kind of mirroring what their clientele was like. Well, we're Central Ohio, right? We have a nice, diverse clientele here. So I was like, okay, where's my niche? What is authentic to me? And so then I started studying personality types, which we all now know to do, right? And studying how people think, right? What makes people tick, and not to be manipulative to try to get them to do something you want, but how they think so that you can better serve them, right? And we all learn different, and we all receive things different, and we all project things differently. And so I kind of got into that mode of understanding, so that when I know I have a data seeker, like, you're giving them more Excel spreadsheets. When you have somebody that really needs to talk through things, that's when you're talking about maybe the parks in the community and things of that nature. And so I started studying personality types, and I think it truly helped.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I love it. I think, the sales, the skill set, I think it's going to be coming back in our market,
It is. It is.
really
The
taking
good
that
and the
time to
bad
look
with the
at it.
rise and the fall. Oh, sorry. The good
No,
and the
go
bad
ahead.
with the rise and the fall is that when things are easy, right? And you see somebody and they put a sign in the yard and they get 14 offers, and people are walking in and they're waiving appraisal gaps, or they're waiving, an appraisal, and they're waiving their home inspection and buying it. Is that what usually happens in a market after that is the fallout, right? And so people are going to get burned. Some of them are going to get burned, some of them are not. And then they're going to look at their next agent. And even if they had a superb agent, they're going to forget some of the positives, and they're going to remember, well, I didn't do a home inspection, and I found out my roof had a hole in it, and I had this bowed basement wall, and I did this and that. So there's always a good and the bad to every market, right? So the good is everybody feels like, oh my gosh, get a listing, you get a closing 30 days later. The bad is when the behavior patterns aren't necessarily focused on not representing your client. I'm not saying that. These people possibly thought they were representing their client, but they didn't slow down enough to educate the client to understand why they were doing what they were doing to get what they were getting. And so they walk away with it. Some will be happy and some will not, right? And that's kind of the
Yeah.
rise in the tide of and the fall of a marketplace. And so that happened before, when all these people were buying big houses and doing zero down, and then the market plummeted, right? And then all of a sudden they're upside down in a new build. They have no equity in it. Their mortgage is more than their house is worth. And then the short sales happened, right? Well, at the time, they thought they had this great agent who said, look, you can get in this big, beautiful house, no money down, and it was great. But they didn't talk to them about the ramifications of things, right? And the same thing's happening now, right? So I think part of it is just learning and thinking about your actions. And it's not necessarily your actions and what they're going to do for you and your client today, but what they're going to do for you and your client in 30 days, in 30 months, in 6 years. And I think that's going to be really crucial, because it's not all HGTV, write a love letter to a seller, show a cute family, which is totally illegal if the seller picked those letters, as we know, and you're going to get a closing. I think it's understanding the nuances of the market and what's going to keep you a high level practicing professional for a long period of time with a good reputation.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I love it. I want to dive into those first, several years. Did you have instant success? Were there struggles? Kind of dive into, I would say, let's break it down. Let's go up to like 2008, right? Or maybe even 2000. What was business like for you? What was the path that in the journey that you took?
Well, we had done back then, a lot of farming in certain communities. So we would get a lot of repeat business just because, you know, they knew us and they felt like they knew us. So it was great because we'd go and, you go on a listing appointment and they talk to you like you're their best friend and you've never met the people before, but they'd seen you enough and you sold their neighbors home. And then we did a lot of print media, which no one does anymore. I mean, well, I shouldn't say no one. You do some, but not as much because it's now
Right.
all digital and social media, right? So there's a difference, things change, times change. But I think the biggest thing is realizing that every client you need to have as an ambassador for your brand. And you are
Mm,
your brand, right? And you want to make that client an ambassador so that every ambassador, every closing, every client becomes not one, but 2 to 3, right? So I think that's crucial. And then I think the second thing is teaching and learning, and I probably learned this from my parents, is that don't judge a book by their cover. So my parents, some of their friends, probably the one that he's a multimillionaire, his family still owns a ton of property down at OSU. Literally, if you saw the guy, you would think he was homeless. He always just put on whatever felt comfortable and never drove new cars. Literally, he was a lawyer, well educated. And so, if you saw him and you sat down to sell him a property, you would think this is like a homeless guy who I'm not going to get him anywhere. And he could buy and sell, most families in this town. And then they had, other people that my dad had hired that like drove up in these brand new cars and were dead, in debt up to their nostrils. So my parents were wise enough to show like, don't judge a book by its color because, you don't know what's in the book, right? So
yeah.
take the time and get to know the person. And you see that. We've all seen that. And then I think some of the big things were that we would take time with people to make sure we knew them. So it wasn't like a turn a trick, do a number, it's all a numbers game. We all know real estate's a numbers game, right?
Right.
You've got to see enough people to get enough closings. But if you know them, right, and they get to know you, they become, again, your ambassadors. And I think that was probably our crucial thing. And then even way back then when we were really young, there was even door knocking where we'd introduce ourselves to people in a community, which after the pandemic, no one will answer their door. But way back then, that was something we did. So people would be like, I remember on a hot day, you guys were out walking around. And I thought, that's what I want, because it don't work when it's 90 degrees out. And so, there's different ways of working now, right? I mean, John, you're a master at like the whole social media game, right? So your ambassadors, your clientele are telling all of their friends about all that you do. Everybody has some niche, right? And so, find your niche and make sure that people know it, because that's how they connected with you and that's how they'll get other people to connect with you, I think, is the biggest key.
What
Just a thought.
what I like what you said, ambassadors, right? I grew up in the business, we called them raving fans. How do you turn a client
Absolutely.
into a raving
And
fan?
I had that book.
And I went through Ninja Selling, which is another coaching company, and they believe that for every one person that we help, they know 4 people that year that are going to be buying or selling or investing in real estate. What do you what were some of the things that you focused on to turn clients into ambassadors?
Well, I think it changed through the years, right? So, in the beginning, so that we knew how we were perceived, we did some focus groups where we invited some people in, clients that were diverse, and had a really nice catered dinner and said, hey, look, we're not selling anything. This isn't like a Tupperware sells, we're not trying to, we truly, honest to goodness, this is truly to pick your brain and get your opinion. And we would have everybody over and have this great dinner and have great wine and great fun and everything, and basically say, okay, we want to pick your brain about stuff. And we actually took notes. So we went through a few years that we did that every so often with groups of people, and it was fun because people like to socialize, right? And then we went kind of through a phase where we had a really large house, and we would do these big parties, right? And literally, like, I'd throw a Christmas party and we would have Santa there, and we'd have pictures with the kids, and they'd all get candy canes and, tell Santa what they wanted, and the parents were there. So they, it was fun. So we went through years that we did that. And that was kind of a way that we connected with our clients, right? And then I kind of went through okay, I did enough of the partying and the big groups. And then it was, I'd rather do stuff one-on-one with people. So then it was like, hey, I want to thank you. And book a nice dinner with them, and then literally kind of converse one-on-one. And it may be the only time you see them in a couple years, but they kind of felt connected, and they, you typically pick a nice restaurant, one that they like, and you got to know them. And then it's kind of like still doing the focus group, only you're just doing it with fewer people at one time. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the move that I went through. And so now it's usually just like a one-on-one afterwards. And sometimes people are not big go out to dinner people. Sometimes they want to have you at their house and show you, and it's like, what can I bring? Some families, if they've got kids, it's ice cream, right? Other people, it's a cheese spread and a couple bottles of good wine. So, again, it's knowing your audience and being able to fit in and then converse.
Yeah. Did you ever get to the point of building like a large team or your own
I did.
brokerage?
I did. I didn't do my own brokerage. We almost did twice, and I'm grateful that I didn't, to be really honest about it. But I did. I got up to, I think there were 6 of us at one point working for
Okay.
me, 5 working for me, and so when you're in it, it's great, and then when you're not in it, it's great. So I think just like anything, life changes, and so um, sometimes big is great, and sometimes small is great, and it depends on who you are, how you are, and how you want to work, and how you work best. So at that point in time, that was great. It was a well-oiled machine. It worked well, loved it. Would I want that today? I wouldn't. And so, now being small looks good. So I would say with a team, or even being small and even having, just either, some people have gone to the virtual assistant, some people still have, a physical assistant. Everybody knows what's good for them. I think just knowing how you do your business is a key for anyone. I think everybody should have a procedure manual. I have mine. I tell every young agent to start theirs. When you do something, document it so it can be repeated. And I think one of the things is, when you think about, and I hate to say McDonald's, if you
Yeah.
want to sound classier, you can say your physician's office. Like, you don't go in there and it's happenstance, right? You don't go in, and some days there's a receptionist sitting there and some days there's not. And sometimes you try to take your own blood pressure and sometimes they do it. It's very routine. And routines are good. And when people say, well, I don't want to be routine. Really? Like, you go to Broadway and you see Cats. You know the theme, you know the lines, they've been rehearsed, but it still comes off flawless and it seems perfect. And so I think that's the big thing that I like to teach younger, newer people in the industry is, make your own SOP manual. Have your standard operating procedures, stick to them, know them, be able to document them, be able to duplicate them. I think
Yeah.
that's key.
I'm right there with you, and it's because and we use the McDonald's as an analogy all the time, right? Like, for us to build the team, it was, how do we systematize this to run like a franchise? right?
Correct.
And the whole point of that isn't to be mechanical, right? But it's to be able to duplicate what you do for one client to the next and to be able to predict the results that you want within the business by providing the same experience from one client to the next, from one agent to the next, and being able to understand that if we do the front side work, the back side results will stay the same as
Correct.
long as we follow the right steps in the right order.
Right. Right. Event plus response equals outcome.
Yeah, and it's one of those
E
things.
plus R, E plus R equals O, right? Isn't that what Tim
Yeah,
Kite taught OSU and we all live by,
yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like they don't teach this kind of stuff in school, and this is why I'm passionate
No,
about helping
no,
agents find
correct.
success in the business, is because I had that. Like I had the mentor that taught me, I had the coaching that taught me,
Yes,
and a lot of agents, I'm like, hey, you have your process. It's just up here.
right,
Just get
correct.
it out of your
Put it
head.
down here. Yes, yes,
And then it's
I would
from
agree.
there, it's your roadmap, right? It's here's how I go out and I get business, and then we tweak it as we go, and and like you said, sometimes it's great to be big, and sometimes it's great to go small, and that SOP will change as your
Yes,
business changes.
yes, yes. And even when you see people, and I laugh about the doctor's office, my daughter just had major surgery. They cut her pelvic girdle apart and rebuilt her
Mm,
hip socket. And so, we're in Boston Children's Hospital, and this surgeon comes in who we adore, and he does more of these surgeries probably than anyone in the country. And literally, she's there, and the anesthesia's been in, and everything. We're waiting for him, and he comes in, and he's got his residents with him and everything, and he's talking to her, and he's talking to the group, and he gets out this permanent marker, and he writes on the side of her leg his initials, perfectly written, about 3-4 inches big, and he writes it. And we sort of chuckled. And so again, that's an SOP for him, and he's a world-renowned surgeon, but he never walks in an operating room or operates on the wrong leg or the wrong hip, because his last thing he does before he leaves for the OR is puts his initials, right? So everybody has everything to get to that level of excellence. And I think the big thing too is never think that the little things are so unimportant because you've gotten so big or so good, because the little things are what keep you so big and so
yeah,
good.
yeah. It's what separates the professionals from the non-professionals, in my opinion.
Yes, I would
And
agree.
it's the uh, and it's not even just like following it; it's the practicing of it, right? It's
Correct.
it's
Correct.
the non-fun, non-social media, sexy side of our business, but it's the one
Correct.
thing that really keeps the successful agent successful is that they follow their process. They don't they don't
Correct.
waver from that process, and they practice that process or system or script or listing presentation or whatever.
Right. Every time. Every time. Yep. Yeah.
Sarah, I know I want to be respectful of your time, so I want to kind of spring forward a little bit as far as timeline of your business. Where kind of lead me up to current day. How when did you build the team? When did you decide to go kind of back small, and then lead me up to kind of current day business?
Oh yeah. So I think I kind of wanted to bring things a little bit smaller when a couple things happened. So I had a couple clients who had worked with colleagues of mine that are worldly successful and I highly respect, and do much more volume than I'm doing. But because they had these bigger teams, um, their clients were now my clients. And so, you always want to learn from, somebody else's history, right? And basically like, yeah, um, she kind of talked to me, and then I got pawned off on this other person, and I just kind of felt like I got lost in the crowd, and I was like, oh. So it was kind of that mindset about the same time that I thought, how much time am I dedicating to teaching, coaching, mentoring, and oversight versus just taking less time, right? And then looking at the net difference, right? Because real estate tends to give awards on gross volume. Okay. And so like, I sold $1 bazillion. I'm a member of the $1 bazillion club, and I have those, right? And you have those. And so, there's some level of importance for probably community and camaraderie to have that. But on the other hand, if I told you, somebody spent 400,000 to gross 400,000 GCI and they netted zero, does that make them a worldly great professional? No, it makes them an idiot, right? And so I started really looking at the numbers, and I thought, what if I did less of this and less of that and less of this and less of that, controlled a little more of my own time, and started to look more at the net dollars. Like, I don't care that I'm not your number one producer. I don't care that I'm not selling $400 billion of real estate a year. But if I'm selling enough and I'm doing a good job and my net is strong enough that I'm pretty happy, then I think we always, if you're a forward-thinking person, aspire to do more, right? I mean, I think if you're not moving forward, you're probably moving backwards, because if you're staying the same, you're moving backwards.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think you have to buffer the difference, right? And some people love that, and some people don't. And I think I got to a place in time, and I had this daughter, that I thought I'd rather spend more time with my family, my daughter, and not mentoring, teaching, coaching. Now that my daughter's going to be going off to Florida soon, my mentality and my mindset, my paradigm may shift a little, right? Because then I won't be so concerned about, time away or time coaching or people, on the phone with. But for the last few years, I wanted to be myself, and maybe, a licensed or unlicensed assistant just supporting me. And it's worked out beautifully. So knock on wood, things have been good. And so, next year may allow for a change when I'm an empty nester, we'll see. I
Well,
think that's probably what will happen.
well, let's talk about next year. What's something that you're looking to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Well, I think a couple things. So, one is I am involved with a ownership in a company that is growing, and it's real estate related, and it's kind of a real estate benefit to people. And so we're starting to really focus on that, because it does a lot of lead generation, and we already have some corporations signed on to it. So that's a huge positive. So I think that also talks about diversifying income streams, right? So that you're not just solely looking at an exchange of dollars or hours for dollar in real estate sales, as we do. So I think that's one thing. So my diversification is there. I think the second thing is I am taking a peek at, sorry for that. See if we can get that to stop. Sorry, hate that. So I think the other thing is I'm kind of looking at taking on a little more of an education piece. So we'll see how that plays. There's a couple of things that I'm looking at, kind of diving into, which I'm going to pick kind of what avenue I go into, because, as you know, I'm like a mind enriching junkie. So there's a couple that I'm doing some research on to do. So I think that's going to be a different venue for me to get involved in. And then I think I'll probably, to be fair, I will probably take on a couple agents and regrow a team. Because at that point in time, I'm going to have more time to kind of dedicate, coach, mentor, and do, and then kind of just keep doing it. Because I think our real estate market is going to change for the good and for the bad. And what I mean by that is, as we've seen recently, we know for a fact that rates have changed some things for some people. But on the other hand, we're very, very blessed in being in Central Ohio with what's going on with Intel. And so, I mean, Intel building chips, 40 minutes away from where I live, isn't going to immediately, just, drop and shake the money tree on new agents getting into the industry. But what it will do is it will really put a demand on the Central Ohio market to both increase our supplies, right? Because we need more rooftops, right? And then also it will allow us to go back to these sellers who haven't sold to say, hey, maybe there's a time now for me to help you tweak your house so that you can maximize what you do and what you want to do and how you can do it, so that now might be a time to make a move, whether they're going to stay here or whether some of them are getting to the point where they're saying, hey, I want to move out. I'm going to move out of state. I'm going to stay here and downsize. I think that's one of those things that all of this is going to help us have conversation starters. And so I think that's the biggest thing in real estate. When people say I hate Zillow, I always laugh and say, don't hate Zillow. You may not like that they are the lion on the hill, trying to eat our dinner, or at least eat part of our dinner. But the other side to Zillow is it's a conversation starter. So if somebody said, oh my gosh, I looked at Zillow and my house is worth this, that's a conversation starter. That's an opportunity to talk about real estate, why you could help them. What do they want? Was it just curiosity? Are they looking for investment? Might they want to make a change? So I think that's a positive.
Yeah. And we're big believers in Zillow and the partnership that we have with them, but it's, go where the people are, right?
Absolutely.
You fish where the fish are. And
Correct.
unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, is that's where everyone at least is. Right now, you have the opportunity, like you said, to either create conversations around it, or you have the opportunity to get leads from it. But at some point, like what you were talking about with the clients that came to you because they were passed off by the team lead to a team agent, there's going to be
Right.
an opportunity where you may get someone from Zillow that you
Right.
can show the pros of working with you versus the pros of going through the iBuyer programs or all of the other things that, were in our market at one time. So it's all about going back to the very beginning of what you said when you got into the business of skills, right? Learning,
Yep. And knowledge.
practicing, and
The
knowledge.
other thing, John, that I think we should talk to more of our associates about is, knowing what's going on and around their community, but other communities, right? Because like when there's an economic forecasting, and I'm not just talking about the one that our association does a phenomenal job at doing in the beginning of the year with Dr. Ted. I'm talking about any of them. A couple of the banks have done some great ones that I was invited to, phenomenal speakers. Some of them are economists, some of them are talking about development. But I think the big thing is like you're saying, fish where the fish
Yeah.
are. And I'm going to tell people, know where the fish are going to be swimming, right? So you know where to cast your net in the future. And
Yeah.
so if you know where development is changing, right? So pardon me, everybody's now heard of Intel, right?
Right.
So everybody's like, oh my gosh, we need to move east. What do you know about Pataskala? Or, what do you think about Newark or Heath? Or, well, those areas have been there forever, right? Like all of a sudden, like yesterday, they didn't become, millionaires. But we know that there's going to be a migration. But the migration, when you look at the path, isn't all right there. I
Right.
mean, they're projecting we're going to have a second outer belt, right? And so people are like, I said that to someone, and they're like, wait, what? We're going to have a second outer belt. Oh, they talked about that forever. I go, well, did you hear that they're connecting 33 to 161? Well, why would that be? That's because they don't want the traffic from Rickenbacker to go all the way through. So logistically, right? Well, that could be part of the first, loop. So
Yeah.
when you start to do that, you can start to coach your clients to be in a better position in the future. So if they're saying, well, I don't want to sell now because things are so expensive, well, move them out more. They're not as expensive where it's not quite yet developed, right? Well, but in tomorrow's world, that's going to be the next, Westerville, Worthington,
Yep.
Lewis Center, Galena, whatever. And then all of a sudden you've made them money, right, down the road, and you've helped them achieve a goal now. So I would tell people, get involved and look at what is going on economically in all these outlying areas, because it's not just Intel over outside of New Albany and
Right.
hearing, oh, New Albany's going to need 11 more hotels. Well, Most of us aren't selling hotels, right? I mean, but we are going to know that they're going to be moving all the way up to Marion now. We know that they're going to be all the way over to Dublin now. So know what's going to happen, and then look at what they're saying the projections for the future are going to be.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I mean, you're spot on. It's just knowing the data, right? Knowing what's going on around you, and
It's learning.
you
It's that L word again.
yeah, and a lot of it's fighting what our clients are hearing on the national level too, and we have to relay the local news, right? But
Correct.
we could go on and on and on about that. Sarah, what's a legacy goal for you? What's something that you're looking to hit when you're no longer here?
I think there was a couple of things. I think when I was president of Columbus Realtors, um, I was told that back then I was very inclusive, and that I really encouraged diversity at the association. And I have some friends that I made because of it, that they said they never really felt there. I mean, we did not have a diversity and inclusion committee until I put together a task force, and then it became a permanent committee. And now, if you see, it's flourishing, right? So I think the legacy that I would like to leave is that you treat people the way you want to be treated. You respect people for both the thoughts that you agree with, and you respect them for the thoughts you disagree with, because it makes you a better person to understand why you stand where you do, and then you understand why they stand where they stand. And then I think that comes back to that L word about learning the differences, learning how to get along with differences, learning why you think what you think. And so I think the legacy would be inclusive learning and connectivity between our fellow colleagues as well as our communities.
I love it. I got one last question for you. If you could give our audience, one piece of advice that either you wish you had starting out, or one that you give, agents on a regular basis, what would that be?
Um, Being an older person now, I would say don't say yes as much. Say no more to certain volunteer things. Like we always encourage everybody to get involved in these, get involved, get involved. Pick and choose, pick and choose things that will enhance your life, because when you give, you get. But when you get, you have a tendency to want to give more, right? So I would say pick a couple things that you want to volunteer in, but don't get overstretched, because it doesn't pay your bills, right? And we all need to talk about making money, or we're not going to be here, right? So I would say to people, find a couple things that are outside of real estate that enhance you, that you learn from, that you can give to, that you enjoy, right? And do them, not too many of them, and then focus on your end game. And what I mean by that is those things will enhance you and sustain you outside of real estate, but look at where you see your end game. And I always tell all my friends, make sure you write down your 10-5-1. And everybody goes, what's a 10-5-1? Where you see yourself in 1 year, where you see yourself in 5 years, and where you see yourself in 10 years, right? And and see if what you're doing is aligning with who you want to be, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or 1 year from now, and then try to focus on it. It's like when we teach about objectives and key results in business school, OKRs, when people study that, are these aligning, with your goals? Are the tasks that you're doing and the things you're doing aligned with it? So I would say focus on who you want to be and where you're going, and then head that way, and keep yourself hip check yourself every once in a while to make sure you're going that way.
Yeah. No, it's some of the, I mean, there's a running joke with some of the agents that I coach, and it's like, I'm always talking about changing my calendar around, trying to be a little bit more intentional with where I'm spending my time, with who I'm spending my time
Yes.
with. And, it's easy to say yes to everything, but is this truly serving me for the goals of what I'm trying to accomplish? Like you said, now, near future, and
Right.
further out future. So,
Right. Right. Sometimes no isn't a dirty word. It's a powerful word. And
Yeah.
it can help the person that you said no to as well as it helps you. Because if you're really not going to be the right match, you don't want to get into something to have to get out of it later.
Right.
So sometimes it's a clear path just to say no and then realign yourself.
No, Sarah, I love it. I appreciate you coming on and sharing
Thanks
your
for having
wisdom
me. I
and
know
your
it's kind of a
journey.
crazy day, and we're going to be running out of town soon. So yeah, we're looking at one final college that I think she's probably going to end up going to. But at
Awesome.
least we'll have my daughter down in Florida where she wants to be. So all is good.
I I love it. Sarah, for those that are listening in, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
You know what? Call me or text me or email me. I'm pretty easy to get to, so I'm always happy to share a thought or anything that I have. I'm not one of those people that think that everything we have is proprietary. I'm a big believer in karma, so I think you get what you give. So I've never told somebody I won't give you something that I've done or have or created or whatever. So if there's something that I can help somebody with, let me know.
I love it. Sarah, thanks so much again. I appreciate you jumping on with me today, and safe travels to
Thank you.
Florida.
And thanks. I'm glad to get out of the snow for a little bit of sun. And I was going to say, and John, sincerely, thank you. Everybody loves what you do, and we're grateful for what you do. And we're just pretty darn lucky that you're here in Central Ohio with us.
Well, thank you so much. I'll talk to you here soon.
Great. Have a great day.